Well, surprises all around this morning. Apple managed to beat expectations in the second quarter with a growth in iPhone sales that is despite an overall downturn in the global smartphone market. Apple CEO Tim Cook credited this win to emerging markets like India, where the company sees plenty of opportunity for growth. Let's bring in Yahoo Finance's Dan Howley for the latest. Hey, Dan.
That's right, Michelle. India was really a central part of the earnings conversation from Apple, basically going on to discuss how Tim Cook had gone there. He'd spent time there. They opened the stores there. And that is, part of their strategy moving forward. Obviously, China is still a major part of their business, but India is increasingly going to be a piece of that. The issues that Apple have there, though, are many, mainly the fact that their devices are too expensive for most consumers in India at this point, though Tim Cook did point out that there is a growing middle class there who will be able to afford their devices. And so that's where they see the next major growth opportunity for iPhone. Outside of that, let's just go over the numbers real quick. We had revenue of $94.8 billion versus expectations of $92.6 billion. That was a beat. They beat on adjusted EPS, $1.52 versus $1.43. They beat on iPhone. They fell short on services, though, as well as Mac and iPad, though iPad just barely, and they beat on wearables. Now, the Mac iPad conversation, that really goes back to what we're seeing across all of tech, where people aren't purchasing computers. They purchased them during the pandemic. They don't need them necessarily right now, and they're expensive items, and people may be questioning whether or not they need them. Smartphones are kind of a different story. People will buy them more regularly. They're also, now that the pandemic is largely past, more essential to people's lives. There where a lot of people are going back to doing work on the go. So you're going to see iPhone perform better naturally than you would Mac. But I think one of the things that I just want to point out is throughout the big tech earnings season so far, the main word, or I guess letters, have been AI. And on the Apple call, Tim Cook didn't utter it once in his opening remarks. And the only reason he did was because an analyst asked about him, and it was only said 4 times. That's compared to the 30-some-odd times we heard Satya Nadella, Sundar Pichai, the 20-some-odd times we heard Mark Zuckerberg say it in their own opening remarks. Tim Cook giving that a big fat goose egg.
Seems that they're taking the wait-and-see approach there. You mentioned some of the softness, though. We talked about Qualcomm and some of their handsets and some of the shortfalls that they were seeing there. So what do you think is going to make Apple more resilient? Is that perhaps that they are focusing on their own chips? Like, why do you think they're able to sort of do better with handsets than some of these other companies?
Yeah, it may just be that, what we saw out of Apple was the really rough performance in Q1 as a result of the lockdowns in China. They weren't able to get the iPhones out. They said in this current quarter, they were able to manufacture to the degree that they wanted to, so there were no real holdups there. I think when it comes to the iPhone, though, I mean, you're going to get better sales overall just because there were some of those holdups where people weren't able to get access to devices. People are going to continue to go out and buy them. Now, when you start looking at Q3, Q4, Q3 is where you get the seasonality really coming in, because the next quarter or the end of Q3, beginning of Q4 is where you get the newer iPhones. So the September timeframe, really, when they start coming out. So they're predicting similar growth to Q3 that they saw in Q2. What exactly that means, there was negative revenue growth, so there was a decline year over year. We'll see how that really works out. But I think it's just, it speaks to Apple's ecosystem effect and its ability to keep people locked in. If you have an iPhone, you have an Apple Watch, you have AirPods, you're going to keep going back to your iPhone. You don't want to ditch it and then have to go to Android and figure something else out. So I think that's really a major part of the conversation.
Indeed. Great stuff there. Thank you for that update. Dan Howley there for us.